Sir Keir Starmer tried to get stuck into him at PMQs today. The only person Keir Starmer should be sacking is himself. He refused to answer the basic question of...
Watch how Keir Starmer is left visibly rattled as a shocking letter emerges during PMQs, raising serious questions about what he knew and when. In a moment no one saw coming, the Prime Minister is confronted live in Parliament, and suddenly the pressure shifts. What was meant to be a routine exchange quickly turns into a tense showdown, with accusations flying and the chamber erupting. Is this a major political misstep or something far more damaging? Before we continue, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to Britain Daily. It's completely free, and it helps us keep bringing you the hard-hitting stories that matter. Let's watch this explosive clip.
Stephen Flynn.
Mr. Speaker, if I've just listened to the Prime Minister correctly, he's essentially rolled the same pitch in relation to Matthew Doyle as he did with Peter Mandelson, that they weren't clear with him. He appears to be the most gullible former Director of Public Prosecutions in history. But he has a slight problem, Mr. Speaker, because some of us do read the newspapers. And towards the end of last year, indeed on the 30th of December, having written to the House of Lords Appointments Commission, I received a response from the Chair, who advised me that as part of their vetting, they provide confidential advice to the Prime Minister on the propriety of a potential nominee. Will he release that advice?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I've made my position clear. He knows how the system works. But, Mr. Speaker, he says he reads the newspapers. He will have read that in 9 days, their former party chief executive goes on trial for embezzling money. And if he'll have read that the Queen Elizabeth Hospital, we see one of the worst failures in Scottish public life. Vulnerable children and adults put at risk. Evidence of serious warnings to the SNP government were ignored. He should have been looking at those, not looking at the newspapers. The First Minister should act, because families deserve accountability.
Can I just remind the President we don't discuss live cases because of subjudice?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As the right honourable gentleman may know, data on immigration status and crime was not recorded under the last government. We have a new programme which will improve data collection, and we have strong local relationships with police and local authorities to ensure that the full force of the law will apply to anyone breaking our laws.
Sir Edward.
The Home Secretary knows perfectly well how much it worries and infuriates people that people can enter this country illegally and commit crimes, and there's no proper vetting procedure before they're unloosed on society. So will she do this to try and reassure our own citizens? Will she ensure that everybody who enters this country illegally is detained, they are fully vetted, most of them, their asylum claims are bogus anyway, perhaps deal with their asylum claims while they're in detention and then deport them and protect our own people?
Well, I of course recognise the public concern around criminality, and that's why, of course, this government is working closely with all of our partners to not just improve data collection, but to have a risk-based approach so that we can manage those individuals who pose the highest risk on our immigration estate. If I may gently say to him, his suggestions for how we deal with those who seek to come to our country illegally, primarily through channel crossings, would have had more force if his government had succeeded in stopping those boats, as they often claimed that they would do so and utterly failed to do so. This government is using a number of approaches to try to get to grips with illegal migration, and will be bringing forward further changes to the House in due course.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The way to deal with any asylum seeker, or indeed any migrant who commits a crime, is to remove them from the country, which is why it's good to see that removals of foreign national offenders have gone up 40% from what was left under the last government. But actually the way you deal with crime in communities is by reinvigorating neighbourhood policing and supporting our police. So does the Home Secretary agree with me that that is two areas where this Home Office is clearing up the mess left behind by the previous government?
My honourable friend is right, as one of many areas in which we are cleaning up the multiple messes left by the previous Conservative government. He's right to note that the removal of foreign national offenders has hugely increased under this government and will continue to do so. And removals from this country are at nearly 60,000 removals since we've been in office, and they will continue to rise.
Shadow Home Secretary Criswell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I recently met Siobhan White, the mother of Rhiannon. Rhiannon was brutally murdered by Sudanese illegal immigrant Den Majek, who stabbed Rhiannon 23 times. Majek arrived by small boat in late July 2024. And as the Home Secretary will know, small boat crossings since the election have gone up by 45%. Now, Majek would have been among the first eligible for removal to Rwanda. So Siobhan wants me to ask the Home Secretary this. Why did the government cancel the Rwanda scheme just before it was due to start? Because if Majek had been removed to Rwanda, Rhiannon would still be alive today.
Let me say, first and foremost, Mr. Speaker, that the murder of Rhiannon White was an abhorrent, horrifying crime, and our thoughts, and I know that of all of the House, are with her loved ones. The vile criminal responsible for her murder is behind bars where he belongs, and he has rightly received the strictest punishment of a life sentence. I don't wish to play politics with personal tragedy and government policy, but he will know, as we have discussed across this dispatch box on a number of occasions, the Rwanda policy was a gimmick, hundreds of millions of pounds spent, with only 4 removals made from this country, the government, his government knew that they were running into problems with that scheme already. This government has focused on measures that we believe will deal with the problems we're facing. It is taking some time, but they are the right measures and they will get to grips with the problem that he left behind.
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and with your permission, I'll group this question with question 16. The Home Office published quarterly statistics show that on the 30th of December 2025, there are 103,426 individuals in asylum accommodation, compared with 108,085 on the 30th of September 2025 and 96,642 on the 30th of June 2024. Of course, that time series is not a like-for-like comparison, but for reference, colleagues will be interested to know that in the final September under the previous government, there were more than 119,000 asylum seekers in accommodation, so the comparable figure from September 2025 is well down on that level.
Mr. Speaker, so the numbers published by the Home Office show around a 7% rise in the numbers in asylum and dispersal accommodation. And my Hillingdon constituents would know, because we have the highest numbers of asylum seekers per capita of any local authority area in the country. In particular, this is putting huge pressure on the supply of temporary accommodation. And my local Conservative council argues that it should put the needs of long-standing local residents for housing ahead of those newly arrived as asylum seekers. Does the Minister agree?
Well, I suspect the Honourable Gentleman would say this too, but I wish the previous government had used their time to actually build some houses. That's at the root of our housing crisis. But it is doubtlessly true that the estate is running hot, which is why he will be pleased to hear of those figures falling September on September. And I'll say to him that future publication of data, without running ahead of that, is likely to show that that trend is one that's continuing. I think one we would all support.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Since Labour came into power, the number of people in asylum accommodation, whether that is hotels or now into dispersal accommodation, is up by over 6,000 people. Now, with figures like this, no resident in South Northamptonshire believes that this government is tackling this issue, especially with the continued operation of the migrant hotel in my constituency. So with the warmer weather coming and the better weather with that, the boat crossings will obviously continue to increase. So what is the government going to do differently to tackle this and stop the boats as they promised?
Well, the Honourable Lady will know that in the asylum policy statement we set out the most significant reforms to the asylum system. Certainly in my lifetime we've already introduced the reduced protection period. We're making quicker decisions, better decisions than ever before. We've increased removals, 30% increase on our predecessors. Those together are decreasing those numbers. As I say, that September on September number, with perhaps future good news to come.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I begin by thanking the Minister for the work that he is doing to close asylum hotels, including the Crew Arms Hotel in my constituency, and can I encourage him to go further still to close the Royal Hotel in my constituency? But will he also join with me in reminding the members opposite that it was under a Tory government, prominent members of which now sit with the turquoise Tories over there, that the concept of asylum hotels was invented, and who presided over the opening up of the business model for small boats crossings in the first place?
Well, the Honourable Gentleman's right, and Reform wants to say that they're a new voice in politics, but they look very similar to the old voice, if you ask me. But the important thing that his constituents will know is that the government, the opposition, when in government, the Tories opposite, they were the ones that opened those hotels, and Labour will be the ones that closed them.
Matt Pickers, Shadow Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On the 30th of June 24, there were 96,642 in asylum accommodation. The latest figures show there are more than 103,000. So despite the creative interpretation, the number is up, not down. There's a distinct lack of gang smashing going on. Crossings are up 45%, and the government's new border commander has already given up and quit. When will the government accept their approach is making things significantly worse?
I mean, I would gently say to the honourable gentleman, I think creativity is pointing at different dates in the calendar of a profile that he knows has seasonal elements to it, and trying to compare them as like for like. He knows that doesn't work. But in terms of, he's very kind in giving him the opportunity to say that with regards to tackling organised immigration crime, that work is at its record level of 37% increase under this government with 5,000 disruptions. That's the serious work. They'll throw rocks from the sideline, but that's what they do, isn't it?
What you've just watched is one of those rare moments in Parliament where everything changes in an instant. At first glance, it seemed like a standard PMQs exchange, another round of questions, another political back and forth. But then came the letter, and with it, a direct challenge to the Prime Minister's version of events. Stephen Flynn didn't just ask a question, he introduced evidence. And in a chamber where perception is everything, that changes the entire dynamic. Because this wasn't about speculation. It was about whether advice had been given formally, confidentially, and crucially before a key appointment was made. Starmer's response? He didn't directly engage with the claim. Instead, he pivoted, shifting the focus onto his political opponents, raising separate controversies and attempting to regain control of the narrative. It's a well-worn tactic in politics. When under pressure, redirect. But here's the problem. When a direct question is met with a deflection, it often raises more questions than it answers. And that's exactly what we saw unfold. Flynn's argument was simple but powerful. If the House of Lords Appointments Commission provided advice as they confirmed in writing, then how could the Prime Minister claim he wasn't aware of key details? That contradiction is what caused the tension to spike. Because in politics, consistency is everything. If the public believes there's a gap between what was known and what is being said now, trust begins to erode, and once that doubt creeps in, it becomes incredibly difficult to contain. The Speaker's intervention added another layer to the moment. By reminding the Chamber of the rules, particularly around ongoing cases, it effectively halted the escalation, but it also highlighted just how close the exchange came to spiralling completely out of control. And that's what makes this clip so significant. It's not just about one letter or one appointment. It's about accountability at the highest level of government. It's about whether leaders can stand up under pressure and provide clear, direct answers when it matters most. Starmer's critics will argue that he avoided the question because the truth is uncomfortable. His supporters will say he was right not to be drawn into sensitive or confidential processes. But for the public watching, the takeaway is far simpler. They saw a question. They saw evidence. And they saw a response that didn't quite match the moment. That's why exchanges like this resonate far beyond Westminster. Because they cut through the usual political noise and put something very real on display, how leaders react when they are pushed to the edge. So the question now is this: was this just a political hit, or does it point to something deeper? And more importantly, will we get a clearer answer next time? If you found this breakdown insightful, don't forget to like, share and subscribe to Britain Daily. It's completely free, and it helps us keep bringing you the biggest political moments and the stories that truly matter.